Hello everyone, this is Professor Martin. I want to welcome you to another of my videos here in the Introduction to Business series. And this one you can see is titled Managing the Business. Now, managing, that's a very important word there. I want you to think back to jobs you have had or currently in, or if you've never had a job, think to those people that you've talked about or heard talk about their jobs. And ask yourself, what makes a good manager? And for those of you that have had jobs before, think back to a favorite manager with whom you've worked with and what made that manager effective. Maybe they assigned special roles in setting organizational goals, or they just seem to maybe have an exceptional ability to communicate with everyone, and they expressed empathy, which is very critical, and a lot of times we don't see that with managers, and that's why we don't call them effective managers if they don't have that ability to show empathy. Or maybe they were just a very effective motivator. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, think back to what you would consider as a poor manager that you've worked with in the past. What made them an ineffective manager? Maybe they were controlling, which is what we see a lot of. Maybe they had very poor communication skills, or they just lacked overall communication skills. Maybe they showed favoritism towards others. There are a lot of things that can make these people very ineffective. And hopefully you don't hold on to those past experiences in a negative way. Hopefully you take those experiences where you've had poor managers and turn those into yourself to make yourself an effective manager by avoiding those terrible characteristics. So over the next few minutes here, and I'm going over this Managing the Business lecture here, I'm going to present an introduction to the foundation of what is effective management. I'm going to describe the nature of management and identify the 4 basic functions that constitute the management process and the different types of managers that you're likely to come across in different organizations. I'll also talk about the basic skills required of managers and the importance of strategic management and effective goal setting in organizational success. And once again, touch on the importance of our overall corporate culture. So let's go ahead and jump in right now and talk about the management process. All organizations or corporations depend on effective management for their success. Now, the principle of management apply to all kinds and sizes of organizations, whether they're small mom and pop entrepreneurships or if they're large corporations. And managers are among an organization's most important resource, especially when you remember that I talked about in previous videos, the most critical component of any organization is its human resources. Now, we're not talking about the human resources department. We're talking about those individuals that make up the organization. So when it comes to management, management is the process of planning, organizing, leading, and controlling an organization's financial, physical, human, and its information resources to achieve the goals that it has set for itself to stay competitive and to exist in the market. Now, I mentioned those 4 key components or basic management functions. And you can see those here. They are planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. Now, planning is that determining what the organization needs to do and how best to get it done. And how do we do that? We plan. And this all begins with determining the organization's goals. Once you've determined those goals, you follow that up by the development of a comprehensive strategy for achieving those goals, and then designing tactical and operational plans for implementing the strategy that you've created. The next basic management function that an individual needs to be in being effective is organizing. Now, organizing involves the arranging of a firm's people and its resources into one coherent structure. Organizational charts help everyone understand each other's roles and reporting relationships as key parts of the organization's function. When we have that organizational chart, we know who's in charge of what, who reports to who, and it helps us to get the right people involved and to know where to troubleshoot and things like that. So organizing is a very key component. The other part here, leading. Now, when leading, a manager works to guide and motivate their employees to meet the firm's overall objectives. Now, the best managers have the capacity to unite their employees in a clear and targeted manner and hopefully motivate them to work in the best interests of the organization. And the last component here in the management process, controlling. Now, controlling is the process of monitoring a firm's performance to make sure that it's meeting its organizational goals. Managers must establish standards and then measure the actual performance against those standards that were set. And then, based on those measurements, adjust activities if needed so that you can establish or meet those performance goals that have been set in place. Now, before I leave this management process, as you're looking at this, I want to talk a little bit more about leading. Now, managers have the power to give orders and then be demanding of the results. However, that's not leading. There is a critical difference between leading and controlling in the behavioral sense of managing. So sometimes you will see, and you can do some research on the big difference between managing and leading. Leading is a key management process. So you can have an ineffective manager who just barks orders and makes big demands, or you can have an effective leader who works to guide and motivate their employees to meet those firm's objectives instead of being a tyrant. So I'm sure most of you can think of examples of that you've seen in your past, or even possibly in your current situations. Hopefully you can see that by being effective in all four areas of the management process, that there is both a science and art that are tied to being an effective manager. And that it takes both education and experience to become an effective manager. Not everything can be taught through reading or video lectures, but it also takes experience. And we're going to make mistakes as managers, but we take those mistakes that we make or that others have made, and we use that experience to turn ourselves into being very effective managers and leaders. Now, these functions of management, these four functions of management here, these are carried about by managers on all levels of an organization. Make sure that you realize that not one of these functions is for a specific manager. As to be an effective manager on any level of the organization, you must be able to be effective in all four of these management functions. Now, even though all managers on all levels must be able to be effective in those four functions, not all managers have the same degree of responsibility for these activities. So it's helpful to be able to understand how we classify managers according to their levels and areas of responsibility. And there are three basic levels of managers, and they are the top, middle, and first line manager. The power of managers and the complexity of their duties increase as they move up that ladder. Let's first talk about that top level, the top managers. This level is responsible for the firm's overall performance and its effectiveness. They are usually going to set the general policies and formulate strategies, approve all the significant decisions of the organization, and represent the company in dealing with its stockholders, its board of members or board of directors, even represent the company with other businesses as well as possibly government bodies. We have, there are a lot of titles you could probably think of right away when it comes to top managers, like the president, the CEO or chief executive officer, the CFO, chief financial officer, CIO, chief information officer, the vice president, president of this, president of that. Those are those top managers. The next group we look at are the middle managers. This level is responsible for implementing the strategies, the policies, decisions, and goals that were set by those top managers. Now, titles that we associate here with middle managers are going to be like plant managers, an operations manager, a division manager. These are going to designate that middle management slot of the organization. And then what most of us have probably dealt with in the past, or may even be in our current situation, are first line managers. Now, the duties of these first line managers are going to depend on the job that they've been assigned. though first-line managers spend most of their time working with and supervising the direct employees who report to them. Some of the titles we see with first-line managers are going to be obviously a supervisor. Maybe they're just given a general title of manager, maybe project manager, group leader, office manager. These are all first-line managers. So definitely know the difference in the types of managers to better understand how their responsibility levels affect those 4 functions of management. Now, in any large company, your top, middle, and first-line managers are going to work in a variety of areas in the organization. And those different areas of management are listed here. Now, we have human resource managers. Now, these are the managers that hire and train employees. They evaluate overall performance, and they can determine the compensation to those employees based on such things as annual reviews or quarterly reviews, however the organization is set up. Another area of management we have are operation managers. Now, these managers are going to be responsible for the production system in which the organization produces its goods and or provides services to its customers. They're going to be also involved in inventory and inventory control, or even quality control. So you'll have different managers within the operational managers, such as a quality manager or a inventory control manager, production manager, whatever the case may be. Now, marketing managers, these are going to be responsible for the development, pricing, promotion, and the distribution of the goods and services that are offered by the organization. Information managers are going to design and implement systems to gather, organize, and distribute the information within the organization or that's needed by the organization. And then lastly, financial managers. These managers are responsible for the firm's accounting functions and its financial resources. Levels of financial management may include such things as a CFO or vice president for finances. And that would be a top level manager. Now, a middle level manager for the financial managers would be like a division controller. And then on the first line management level, you might see, as an example, an accounting supervisor. So that's just an example of how we apply the 3 areas or the 3 levels of management to an area of management, such as which I just did with the financial managers. Now, that's not to say that an organization may not have some other type of manager that would not fall into this group. They might employ some type of specialized manager, such as a public relations manager, which wouldn't fall really into any of these because of what their job role is. So these are the 5 main areas of management, but you could come into an organization where you see another completely different type of specialized manager. Now, regardless of what their level is of management or what areas within the organization they are in, all managers must play certain roles and exhibit certain skills if they wish to be successful. Let's take a look at 3 of those type of managerial roles that I want to talk about here. We have the interpersonal roles. Now, there are 3 interpersonal roles inherent in the manager's job. First, the manager is often expected to serve as a figurehead, taking visitors to dinner, attending ribbon cutting ceremonies, and such things as that. The manager is also expected to serve as a leader when in the process of hiring or be in the process of training and motivating employees. And then another interpersonal role is that the manager can have as a liaison role. Now, this role often involves serving as a type of coordinator or some type of link amongst people between groups or organizations. We also have the information role. Now, the 3 informational roles flow naturally from interpersonal roles that I've already discussed. The process of carrying out the interpersonal role places a manager at a strategic point to gather and then disseminate various information. The first informational role is that of the monitor. This is one who seeks out active information or actively seeks out that information that may be of value to the organization. The manager is also going to be a disseminator of the information, transmitting relevant information back to others within the organization. Now, these two roles combined illustrate the manager's role as a vital link in the organization's overall chain of communication. And then the spokesperson formally relays that information to people outside the unit or outside of the organization. So those are the information roles. Now, lastly, the decision role. Now, the manager's informational role typically lead to the decisional roles. First, the manager has the role of the entrepreneur, the voluntary initiator of change. The manager is acting as a disturbance handler when handling such problems as maybe there's a union strike, or there's been a copyright infringement, or problems in the public relations or corporate image. Now, as a resource allocator, the manager decides how resources are distributed and with whom that they will work most closely with. And then lastly, here in the decision roles, the manager acts as a negotiator. The manager enters into negotiations with other groups or organizations as a representative of the organization. In addition to fulfilling numerous roles, managers also need to have a certain set of specific skills if they are going to succeed and be effective. The most fundamental management skills are technical, interpersonal, conceptual, decision-making, and time management skills. The skills needed to perform specialized tasks are called technical skills. Now, these skills are developed through a combination of both education and experience once again. Technical skills are especially important for first-line managers who spend most of their time with the day-to-day tasks and operations of the production system. The next skill I'm going to talk about is the human relations skill. Absolutely necessary for managerial success, human relations skills are skills in understanding and getting along with people. These skills are important at all management levels, though most important for middle managers. Good communication skills are key to understanding others and maintaining very good relationships. Next, move on to conceptual skills. Especially prevalent among the top managers, conceptual skills involve the ability to think in the abstract, to be able to diagnose and analyze different situations and to see beyond that present situation. Decision-making skills are going to include the ability to define problems and select the best course of action when facing those problems. Now, these skills involve gathering facts, identifying various solutions, evaluating any type of alternatives, and then implementing the chosen alternative to the problem. And the last basic management skill is that of time management. Time management skills involve the productive use of the manager's time. And I'll talk about some of those leading causes of wasted time. And they are going to be, and you will probably be able to identify with most of these. So in organizations, those distractions that affect the time management skills are going to be the wasted time on paperwork, those telephone calls that interrupt you, the meetings, and then meetings about the meetings. And then lastly, one of the leading causes of wasted time is, of course, all of the various email we have to check and keep up on. And some people, of course, think that they need to check their personal email while they're at work, and that definitely takes a lot of time away from their daily activities and being productive. And it's more prominent now that people are using and checking their social media. I'm going to count this in on the email section here because this takes people's attention away from what they're doing. And the time management skills are critical in being effective, and you will find that those most effective managers have very good time management skills, and they're not spending all their time checking social media and stuff like that. So those are the definite leading causes of wasted time in the organization. Now, besides those distractions, we need to think about competition. And competing globally and managing technology are two major challenges facing managers. Managers, whether you're a current manager or a tomorrow manager, you must equip yourselves with the specific tools, techniques, and skills needed to compete in a global environment. These are going to be very critical skills to gather. You need to be able to understand those foreign markets that you're trying to compete in, the cultural differences, the motives and practices of foreign rivals. You also need to understand how to collaborate with others around the world on a real-time basis. And as a 21st century manager, new forms of technology are going to add to your ability to process information. And these new forms are going to make it even more important to organize and interpret the ever-increasing wealth of input and data. And you need to be able to develop effective technology skills to manage all of that. Now let's move on to another area, and that's called strategic management. And this is the process of helping your organization maintain an effective alignment with its environment. And a couple things that we'll mention here are goals. Goals are objectives that a business hopes and plans to achieve. And then the strategy is a broad set of organizational plans for implementing the decisions made for achieving those organizational goals. So once again, we have strategic management, which is a process of helping the organization maintain an effective alignment with its environment. And a strategy is that broad set of organizational plans for implementing the decisions made for achieving the goals that were set forth by the organization. Now let's talk a little bit more about those goals. Goals are performance targets, which are the means by which an organization and its managers measure success or failure at every level of the organization. So we set goals, and this is the way we measure ourselves and our organization by if we achieve those goals or not. So in general terms, a goal is the means by which the organization and we as managers measure our overall success and failure. So what about a little bit more about setting business goals? Well, we need to know what the purpose of setting goals are. And an organization functions systematically because it sets goals and it plans accordingly. And the four main purposes of organizational goal setting is going to include providing direction and guidance for managers at all levels of the organization, helping firms allocate its resources. Another reason or purpose for goal setting is to help define our corporate culture. And lastly, helping managers assess their overall performance. Now, every firm or organization has a purpose and a mission. And a mission statement is going to exist, which is a statement of how the organization will achieve its purpose in the environment in which it operates. Now, in addition, every term is going to have 3 types of goals. And we need these goals. We need to have long-term goals, which look at 5 years or greater into our future. We need to have those intermediate goals, which focus on a period of 1 to 5 years. So we want to meet those goals within that period. And we also need to have short-term goals that we set, which are in that near future within a year. I also mentioned strategies. So we don't just have goals, different types of goals, we also have different types of strategy. And we have these 3 types of strategies that we consider as an organization to help meet those goals. And you'll see those here. We have the corporate strategy. And you see this is the overall spectrum here. This is the most external of this hierarchy of strategy. The corporate strategy, now the purpose of this is to determine the firm's overall attitude towards its growth and the way that it will manage its business or its product lines. Now the competitive or business strategy here in the middle, this is the strategy that focuses on improving the company's competitive position in the market or its environment. And then we have the functional strategy. And with functional strategy, managers in specific areas are going to decide how best to achieve corporate goals by performing their functional activities as productively as possible. So in these functional strategies, these are those to meet those smaller goals. So we're going to do what we can in our functional area to help meet the overall corporate goals, and that will help feed the other strategies. Now, strategy tend to be wider in scope than planning. Strategy describes what an organization intends to do. So when it comes to strategy formulation, this is going to involve 3 basic steps. Step 1 is we're going to set strategic goals, of course. And those strategic goals are going to be our long-term goals derived from the organization's mission statement that I mentioned earlier. Once we've set those strategic goals, step 2 is analyzing and organizing our environment. And we'll typically do this with a SWOT analysis. And the SWOT analysis is just an assessment, really. And it's the assessment of our organization and our environment. And the process is going to involve assessing the organization's strengths, weaknesses, and our environmental opportunities and threats. So strengths and weaknesses, SW, opportunities and threats, the OT for SWOT. And the third step in our formulating strategy is going to match the organization with its environment. And in this step in our strategy formulation involving matching our organization's strengths and weaknesses to our opportunities and threats, this step is at the heart of strategy formulation. An organization should attempt to leverage its strengths so that we can capitalize on the opportunities that are available to us and counteract any threats that we've identified. We should also attempt to shield our weaknesses so that they don't hurt the organization. Understanding your strengths and your weaknesses are also going to impact whether your organization takes additional risks or behaves more conservatively to avoid any type of failure. Now I want to talk about the hierarchy of plans. Now, plans in our organization can be viewed on 3 different levels. We have strategic plans, tactical plans, and operational plans. Managerial responsibilities are defined at each of these levels. The levels here are going to constitute a hierarchy because implementing plans is practical only when there is a logical flow from one of the levels to the next. Now, usually these are set by a board of directors and top management with input from others in the organization. Now, if we take a look at the top here, strategic plans are going to focus on steps needed to meet strategic goals of the organization. Usually this is going to involve upper and middle managers. The tactical plans are going to be concerned with implementing certain aspects of those strategic plans, and these tactical plans are also going to have shorter term for these plans. Now, middle and lower level managers are going to help develop those operational plans, and these are going to be geared towards much shorter short-term goals. So, in a nutshell, top managers are commonly going to perform the strategic plans. Top and middle managers are going to carry out tactical planning, and then middle and first line managers are going to carry out operational planning. Let's talk now about management and the corporate culture. Now, corporate culture is the shared experiences, stories, beliefs, and norms that characterize our organization. The corporate culture is going to help us define the work and business climate within our organization. It's going to be really our unique identity of the company, and it's going to help direct employees' efforts towards our company goals. But there's a couple things we need to do. Let's talk about building the communicating culture. Now, this is going to involve having an understanding of the culture, transmitting the culture to others in the organization, and maintaining the culture. So we need to understand it, be able to transmit it, and be able to maintain it. Corporate culture influences management philosophy, our management styles, and our managerial behaviors. Managers, we must carefully consider the kind of culture that we want for our organizations, and then work to nourish that culture by communicating with everyone in our organization, because effective communication is the key to building our corporate culture. And then we have changing culture. Organizations must sometimes change the cultures that we've had for however long. And this is going to involve analyzing the company's environment, then formulating a vision of a new company, and setting up an appraisal and compensation system for the employees who help reinforce and enforce the new values that we want in our new culture. And based on the changing culture that we must employ, you're going to find out that some types of corporate culture change are going to be easier and some are going to be more difficult based on the overall environment that you are working in the environment or the organization that you are employed. And it's not just one person that can do this. It takes everyone. And that's why communication is so critical. And as an effective manager, you need to be able to effectively communicate and lead. And that is how we get through whenever we need to make a change in our organizational culture. Ooh, I know that was a lot, but we got through it all. A lot in this quick chapter on, or lecture on, managing the business. There's a lot that we discussed, ending with how important our corporate culture is and how we sometimes need to adapt and change our corporate culture and communicate that effectively to all members or human resources in our organization. Well, that is it for this video lecture on managing the business. I know it was a lot of information. I want to thank you for following along, and I hope you enjoyed the content and have maybe a little bit better understanding of some of the aspects that were discussed in this lecture. Thank you for following along, and I hope you will join me in another of my video tutorial series on introduction to business.